Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you this morning, and I really appreciate all the work that has gone into organizing this conference. Kiara, you did a great job once again, so thank you so much. You can clap for Kiara, she deserves it. Dr. Veronese created this conference because he wanted to build support for science, for the culture of careful analysis, for the appreciation of reason. He believed in the scientific method, to recognize how much we don't know, to examine the facts, weigh the evidence, and always search for a theory that actually makes sense. As we heard yesterday, he was a superb doctor. He operated on thousands of women who suffered from breast cancer. He knew intimately that scientific breakthroughs led to longer and healthier lives. And as Secretary of Health, I'd like to point that out because he also knew the value of politics. He helped to lead the effort to stop smoking in restaurants. He made a compelling case to do this because science, medicine, and economics all converged to point to a single truth: prevention of lung cancer and the complications of smoking saved the Italian economy millions and billions of dollars in healthcare savings in the future. I remember when he tried to do this that many around the world doubted that this could happen in Italy. Actually, so many of us remember Italians smoking. But Dr. Veronese persisted. Then those naysayers didn't know Umberto. His faith, his force of personality, and his use of science and objective data prevailed. Still, as Dr. Veronese knew, those who believe in science must be ever vigilant and be prepared to fight false statements, deceptions, and lies. This is a particular fragile moment. The United States government is silencing scientists, is doing this by withholding budgets and by promoting fake science as real science. There are fights over the efficacy of vaccines and over climate change as just two examples. One of the top Republican pundits blames the Hurricane Harvey not on climate change, but on the fact that the former mayor of Houston was gay. Good translation. The United States has pulled out from the Paris Climate Pact. President Trump has issued an executive order telling the EPA to ignore the cost of carbon pollution, and his budget slashes funds for EPA, for NOAA, for NASA Earth science missions. Climate change is perhaps the best example of a science issue that is most highly politicized. Poll after poll shows that those who believe that climate change is real and caused by human activity are on one side of the political spectrum, and those who don't are on the other side. The vaccine issue is another matter. Not quite as politicized. In fact, many Americans believe the benefits of vaccines outweigh the risks. The problem for all of us is that those who are not driven by objective data can sometimes be outshouted by the loudest voices in the room. And in communities not given to questioning or probing and seeking truth, those loud voices prevail. What's perhaps even more jarring is the absolute certainty with which those who are driven by political ideology hold those beliefs. Here's a somewhat amusing and weird example. A quick survey was reported in the political journal Foreign Affairs. The question posed to Democrats and Republicans was simple: should the United States bomb Agrabah? Something like 53% of Republicans said absolutely yes, and 47% of Democrats said absolutely no. The views of both groups were firm and unwavering. The problem, of course, is that Agrabah doesn't exist. For those of you who know Disney, Agrabah is the fictitious home of Aladdin. You see how firmly people responded with no basis in fact. We all bring our biases into our belief systems, and when it comes to science, these biases can take their toll. Firmly held but misguided beliefs in science are a danger to societies and to democracies. Thomas Jefferson said, "Where the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government." Now, 200 years later, being well informed is a real challenge. With quite literally millions of websites at our fingertips, anyone with an opinion and a computer can lead and persuade others. Only a fraction of the websites contain credible, objective information, as we've seen with the Russian invasion on our websites in the United States. But so many of our citizens believe and promote ideas based on these ill-informed websites. This is not what Thomas Jefferson envisioned. The challenge for those of us who support science is to figure out a way to be effective. How can we promote science in societies where power, money, religion, gender affect what people want to see or want to believe? The experience with vaccine doubters, climate change deniers, Donald Trump supporters, and yes, our long experience with human nature is a hard lesson in the elusive nature of truth. When people don't want to hear what you want to tell them, what do you do? Because of the attack on vaccines, scientists are now exploring the best ways to reach those who doubt the value of vaccines. These findings may apply to the other areas of dispute. As scientists, the first rule is know your audience. As Galileo learned, even pointing to the moons that circled Jupiter didn't convince the bishops who could, like him, look through the telescope. If you don't want to see those moons, you won't. Do you know that story? Can I see a show of hands who know the story of Galileo? That's good. I just like to know if anybody can follow what I'm saying. The good thing is the students of Italy know the story of Galileo. Well done. As the American writer Upton Sinclair said, this is a really astute quote, "It is difficult to get a person to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." The bishops thought that their power came from one view of the universe, which Galileo threatened. We know this happens all the time. We've just learned that Exxon saw that global climate change was threatened by oil, and so they squashed the studies about global climate change, just as the bishops squashed Galileo. People who believe something deeply cannot be persuaded. Michael Lewis started his book, The Big Short, which was a story about the 2008 financial meltdown, with a quote from Leo Tolstoy. I'm not going to quote Leo Tolstoy. The most difficult subjects can be explained to the most slow-witted man if he has not formed any idea about them already. But the simplest thing cannot be made clear to the most intelligent man if he is firmly persuaded that he already knows without a shadow of a doubt what is laid before him. Got it? So this is not a question about how smart you are, how high your IQ is, how bright you are. It's a question of what do you believe? Lewis's book was about how most everybody in the United States believed that property values were going to go up endlessly. They didn't. A few figured it out, and they, what is called, shorted the market, and they made millions of dollars. But until that happened, they were considered weird, outcasts, misfits. Now, when Tolstoy wrote that piece, it was just a nice quote from an author. Studies have shown him to be absolutely correct. When people who believe something deeply are given a contradictory fact, it actually serves to make people believe what they believe falsely, believe it even stronger. Isn't that weird? You can say, yes, it's weird. It's totally bizarre. It happens to be true, but it is weird nonetheless. So the question is, what do you do about that? Some of you can give up, which is actually going to be part of my message. But one of the things you can do is try to figure out, how do you reach people? I was reminiscing recently with a friend who helped to put AIDS on the agenda at the State Department. This was before the PEPFAR program. And she wanted the Secretary of State to speak about AIDS as a foreign policy issue. Each of our ambassadors should talk about them as well, about the priority for the United States to talk about AIDS. But it took a year of persuading, because the two priorities for the State Department are economics and defense, and AIDS did not seem to fit. But as a young scientist, she looked at her audience and made arguments which showed that the GDP, the gross national product, would decline in several African countries, causing instability if AIDS were allowed to continue to grow as it was, and that was one argument. And the second argument she made is that U.S. troops in the UN humanitarian peacekeeping forces could be exposed in the trenches to blood that was infected with AIDS. These arguments, economic, regional instability, and military health, led to action. So the point is, know your audience and use your scientific arguments well. So what can we do at a time when, as the author Sean Otto tells us, there is a war on science? I'm going to give you what I call my 5 rules. You can think of 5 other rules, or you can think of 10 rules, or you can think of 3 rules. It's always good to have a number. First, my first rule is, don't waste your time on true believers. Now, if you're young and you're in the back of the audience, don't think that anybody is a true believer if they're under the age of 20. Okay? Anybody under the age of 20 should be persuadable. Anybody over the age of 50 is a lost cause. That includes me. Okay? It really is. I can go into that in greater detail. In politics, we have a view. If they already have a bumper sticker for the candidate that you're running against, don't try to spend any time with them, okay? Second, concentrate on the persuadables and those who have a financial interest in knowing the truth. Luckily, not everyone is closed-minded. For instance, in the case of vaccines, some people, and this is based on studies, can be persuaded by pictures of children who got sick because they have not been vaccinated. Others have been persuaded by arguments that by not vaccinating your child, you're hurting vulnerable children, babies, for instance, who are too young not to get vaccinated. It also helps if the doctor simply says, I won't treat you unless you get vaccinated. Threats. Some people call that the nudge approach. I call it threats. But these are things that you can do. The hurricanes Harvey and Irma and Maria, the mudslides in Sierra Leone, the earthquakes in Mexico, actual facts have at least helped to change the minds or open the minds of a few of the persuadables that climate change may be real. They don't actually like to use the words climate change, but they are open to figuring out what they should do to protect their homes from future floods. Third, keep up those reasoned arguments for your friends and colleagues. They need to know what you say. They need to have their positions clear. Many people adopt the views of their peer group. Make sure that your peer group and communities view you as the authoritative, objective source. So do your own research, know what's going on, and speak authoritatively and help your friends know what's going on. You can do this for your friends, but also you can work with the media, pitch stories to editors. You should be the go-to person for science stories. Editors need to hear from reasonable people. And fifth, as you can imagine what I would say, get involved politically. Now, think of this. What do these people have in common? Margaret Thatcher, Angela Merkel, Thomas Jefferson, Jen Ben Chow. Does anybody know what they all have in common? Come on, you guys. This is a big audience. Somebody must try to at least guess what they all have in common. Will somebody raise their hand, please? A little interaction. Now, my daughter, Kat, is not allowed to answer the question. Yes. This is my fellow, yes. Yes. Each of them were, well, first I would say they're all presidents of their country, and they all had a scientific background. Okay, that's pretty cool, right? So the idea is you can be a scientist and a successful politician. And that's what I think we need in the world today. More people running for office who know science, who appreciate science, and who can talk truly about science. Yesterday, as you know, I mentioned that scientists and medical doctors were the second most respected group after the military. So each of you are here to hear about science, but you can also understand that you're in a political world. As Aristotle said, man is a political animal. I would include women. So today, you're going to learn about science. You're going to learn about persuasion. You're going to learn about how things get done. And I hope you'll learn about how you can make a difference. You can run for office. You can help people run for office. You can get involved in a campaign. After all, if you don't do it, who will? Good luck, and God bless you.